Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You're tuned into BlackDoctor.org as we discuss and talk about some of the issues that are plaguing our community, some of the things that are happening in the news and the media with violence and just the unrest and frustration that has been going on within our community. And there have been numerous amounts of people who have been asking questions like, how do I cope with this? How do I deal with this? How do I find a solution or a remedy for this problem that is plaguing our community? And rather than take the approach of talking about it from a kind of, victim, or we need to do this, or woe is us, I thought that it would be really, really helpful if we offer and have an opportunity just to find some ways to cope, how to deal with all of this, how to just go into a place of looking for inner solutions from a mental health perspective, from a mental well-being, from a self-awareness perspective. And I have some awesome panelists here today, and I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves to you. And first, I'll start with you, Asha.
Good. Hello, everybody. I'm Asha Terry. I'm a licensed mental health specialist and a life coach.
Thank you so much. And next we have Dr. Isaiah Pickens. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and all that good stuff.
Yes, I am a clinical psychologist, and I work here in the city with kids who are locked up and really experiencing a lot of the issues that we see in Baltimore, and struggling with how do they fit in a society where they may not have felt that they've gotten the opportunities to really be able to reach the potential that they want to reach. And so I'm just excited to be here and be able to have this really important conversation.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Well, one of the things we believe in here at BlackDoctor.org, being that it's your source for all things in the medical community, all things relevant to a lot of the topics and issues of today, we wanted to provide an opportunity to have a really in-depth chat with you guys. And so I thank you guys for being available at last minute's notice. We were able to pull this together really quickly. So I just want to jump on in and begin the Q&A. One of the first questions that I wanted to ask a couple of friends of mine and just different people within the office, and we were just kind of talking about it. What are some of the psychological effects that could be plaguing some of our urban communities?
So I'll begin. One of the things that we're oftentimes plagued with is, poverty, and poverty has its impact on systems and multi-generational systems in communities nationwide. So when we look at the children that we're talking about in Baltimore, these are children that are coming from generations of family members who are part of a cycle of poverty. And that has an impact on people's socioeconomic status, as we know, but it has a big impact on people's psyche. So when you think about the psychological impacts on people's mind and looking around their environment and stepping outside their environment, and all they see is poverty and violence and inadequacy, it has an impact on how people feel about themselves emotionally, socially, and esteem-wise. So that's one of the major impacts that's a constant in communities and urban communities across the nation, and it doesn't change because things become heightened. It remains a constant factor.
I think that's a great point Asha brings up with understanding people in context. The environment that they come from plays a huge role. And so if I had to really give a specific reason or a specific contributor to what we're seeing, I would just say trauma. So when we talk about trauma, we're usually talking about an event that is very scary, and it makes the person feel like their life is threatened or serious bodily injury will happen. In order to even get PTSD, you have to have had experienced a traumatic event. And a lot of our kids, particularly our kids who come from communities that have few resources, are constantly experiencing multiple traumas, whether it is not having enough food at home, whether it is seeing community violence, drive-bys, or being involved in gangs where there's a lot of violent activity, or even if it's coming from the hands of the parents, whether it's abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, working in detention. Over 90% of the kids I work with have experienced at least one trauma, and over 40% of them have symptoms that relate to PTSD. Some of them reach the criteria for PTSD, but some of them just show symptoms that are related to PTSD but might not reach the criteria. And those numbers are staggering. And so, I think that's a lot of what we're seeing with our kids, because trauma really does inform how you think about yourself, especially if it happens early in life.
Thank you for that. That is really interesting. And like when you think about that, especially with those numbers, I wonder, like, how did it enter into the community? Like what are, or not even how did it enter, but what are some of the symptoms of PTSD, and how can we be aware, or how can we know how to look for it, or know that this is something that needs to be addressed within the community as a whole?
I guess I'll take this one first. We can switch it up, me and Asha. When we talk about PTSD, what we are talking about are really 5 major symptoms. So the first one is re-experiencing, and this is when people have intrusive thoughts, they have nightmares. We see it a lot with veterans during 4th of July when they feel like they're back at war, when they hear the fireworks go off. We also know that hyperarousal or hyperreactivity, which is being on edge all the time, is a huge piece. We see this with a lot of our kids, sometimes being very aggressive because they feel that there's threat that's around them. We also see avoidance and numbing. So either they're trying to get away from something by isolating themselves, or they use drugs and alcohol, or even they might use sex to be able to get away from certain feelings that make them feel uneasy. Another symptom that we see is negative mood alteration. So alterations in mood and thought patterns. So this is feeling depressed or feeling guilty about things that aren't even your fault. And then the last symptom we see is disassociation. This is an out-of-body experience, and so it's the sense that, I'm not there. One thing we have to understand about all these traumatic stress reactions, that's what we call them, is that for the trauma, they are adaptive. So what that means is they're doing that in that moment to survive. But the problem, what makes PTSD is that they still do that even when they aren't in that environment. So if we have a kid who's, being really aggressive to get home because they live in the projects just to survive, that makes sense for that environment. But if they do that when they get a new job and they're being aggressive towards a customer, they could get fired, and it's not adaptive for that environment. And so that's where we see a lot of these things show up in our community, and sometimes people don't really know how to deal with it, and they just label it as bad behavior.
Very true. Just to add on to what Isaiah was saying, when we talk about the question at hand as to how this become a part of our community, we speak to the issue that I mentioned earlier about generational patterns. So it takes sometimes 2 to 3 generations before a group of people can come out of a socioeconomic status. So when we look at communities that are urban, that are disenfranchised, communities that are already impoverished, we're talking about historically generations of people who've been impoverished for many, many years. When we look at some of the symptoms that it plays into urban communities, these are reactive responses that people have, speaking to what Isaiah mentioned, in terms of how they may feel always at threat of being intruded upon, at being attacked, at being even threatened. So we don't oftentimes have space and room in our day-to-day encounters to reteach new ways for young people or people who feel at threat often to react or respond in a different manner. So that becomes a normative pattern of behavior that ultimately we live out in our day-to-day actions.
Yes, thank you. That was really in-depth, you guys. I appreciate that insight. Again, if you've just tuned in, you are tuned in to BlackDoctor.org live panel discussion about stress, community, and change. How do we deal? How do we deal with the pressures? How do we deal with a lot of the violence that is happening, the police brutality from, some of our cultural issues of just our disciplining issues. And I heard you talk about different stressors and different symptoms of that stress. And I know something that is really huge in our community is how we choose to discipline and how we choose to handle situations, what are some ways that we can, or are there some ways to prevent PTSD, or are there some tips on how to manage it? And I'll start with you, Asha.
As community professionals, I'll take it from a professional standpoint. It is our responsibility as communities of professionals in this industry in which we are currently working in to be able to be in the midst of the community where they are. So when we look at people who have been traumatized for many years and have been re-traumatized, we have to respond to where people are in those moments. So we have to bring the information to the people. So for example, with this conversation, this is a conversation that needs to happen to be able to talk to the emotionality of where people are. So we can't talk above them or talk to necessarily the symptoms, but we have to talk to the emotions and the feelings of where people are in this current time. People are either going to want to continue to react because in the psyche, the mind is going to be, if it's at threat, it's going to respond in a threatening manner. People are either going to be frozen in those moments and feel like there's no way to respond and don't know what to do, and then there's moments that people are going to totally flee and feel as though that's the only response they do have, the only choice they do have. So we do have to, as professionals, meet people where they are. I think also we need to introduce other ways that people can call upon community leaders, like the church, like the ministers, like people who ultimately in the clergy are there to provide comfort and respite to the people who feel like there's no way to handle the heightened mood that we're in when we feel like there's nothing else that we can do. So I think we have to call on all the different parts of our communities that we trust and that we have trust in to really ask for support and help. And then we have to provide the education about what the symptoms are so that people can understand what the symptoms look like. People don't know how to respond or how to seek out treatment or help and support until they are educated on what those symptoms actually are and what they look like and how they are demonstrable in different communities and in different ages.
Yeah, I think all of that is very important, and that's from a big picture perspective in terms of what we need to do moving forward. I think from a layperson perspective in terms of just day-to-day things, one thing that's really important is just to normalize feelings. And what I mean by that is people feel what they feel. Feelings aren't right or wrong, but it's how they respond to them that can be really difficult. And I think sometimes in situations like this, when people have experienced extreme stress, or maybe they haven't experienced extreme stress that you know of, you might say, oh, you shouldn't feel that. You shouldn't feel guilty about what happened because it wasn't your fault. Well, once you put these shoulds on things, it puts extra pressure on a person to act a certain way, and therefore limits how much or the ways that they feel they can cope with the situation. So just by saying, I understand, that sounds really difficult. I don't know what I would do in that situation. Have you thought about talking to someone? You open up a conversation that is completely different, then you really shouldn't feel that. You want to go out, let's do something, let's fix it. And sometimes that mentality to fix it just makes the problem worse.
Yes, thank you for that. That was really, really good. It's so funny because I've been seeing such an influx of content and different things that come online, and we'll see it will be on a social platform, and we'll see like all of the different the violence. It seems like a new story is coming out every day about something that's happening within the community, and I oftentimes wonder, can you be impacted or affected by those images that you see in that manner? Like, we'll see police brutality one week, we'll see violence in the community another week, or it's like such a heightened level of intense violence that we see on a regular basis, even if you don't watch movies, even if you don't particularly subscribe to that particular platform of violence. It seems like you're inundated as of late with this information. Are there some effects or impacts of that negatively on the psyche? Have you all been seeing an increase of people not being able to cope or having issues with some of the things that they see through the social platforms?
I think this speaks to the idea of self-care. So self-care is really about being able to manage what's happening around you while at the same time being able to kind of deal with the demands that you have and really be able to support yourself or feel like you're safe mentally, and these things can infringe on that. You know, seeing these images constantly, feeling that there's threat around, and this can go from both perspectives. I know we're talking about the Black community as a whole, but you know, if people in other communities feel that there's threat from the police, or if there's a sense that even on the police's side, if they feel that there's constant threat because of the way people might respond to them now that they are police, this really can infringe your sense of safety. We call it psychological safety. And once that is compromised, it really makes it difficult to trust other people. It makes it difficult to sometimes respond in rational ways because you think people are a threat. And you know, it is something that I think it can have a huge impact on us, but it's really about being able to create boundaries around that. We want to be informed. We also want to know how it's impacting us and how we're taking care of ourselves once we get that information.
Yes,
Yes.
and I want to just add on. That's a great point, Isaiah. I just wanted to add on to what you were saying too. So, in my practice, I see adults, and even myself personally, I know when there is an increased amount of violence that we see and that we're exposed to on social media, on the news and radio, I think it does increase our own level of anxiety. It makes it a little bit more difficult to get through the day. People are a little bit more on edge. Folks are feeling like they're a little bit more hypervigilant because of this feeling that there's an imminent sense of threat to you, whether it's real or imagined. So I think not only do the practitioners, but also our clients do feel like when we see and we're exposed to this constant sensationalism of the media portraying these negative images of violence, not only locally, but also nationwide and worldwide, we do have a feeling of more anxiety, a little bit more angst in our bodies. It's tangible. You can feel it when you're encountering other people. So definitely, I know that this is like any other time when there's violence or war or threat of danger, that we do feel a little bit more antsy than normal.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And again, if you just tuned in, you're tuned in to BlackDoctor.org. We're having a live panelist discussion talking about the effects of violence from a community perspective. We wanted to open up the conversation, so please feel free to submit some questions. We'll be answering questions, or if you just need to vent, if you need to share an experience that you've had, if you need to share and just need someone to just stand with you or just speak about it, or provide you with a solution how to deal with the situation. We wanted to provide a platform for you to express yourself, for you to vent, and for you to talk about what you see in your community and have a place to do that in, with no judgment, with no particular rules on how to do that, but offering just a space for us to just communicate and talk and us listen. So please feel free to submit your questions right here on YouTube, and I'll be going through those questions and toggling back and forth and providing the questions to our panel. Moving along, one of the things that I've been seeing are our children. It seems like an uprising within the community of our youth, where they are kind of taking that baton, and they may not be handling it in the best responsible manner, but they definitely are saying, look, we're fed up here. We haven't had answers. We've been pushed to the side. We're not being provided with the proper resources, the proper things that we need, and so we're going to just revolt, and we're going to have a revolution. I wanted to know, Dr. Isaiah, and maybe you can also speak on this too, Asha. I wanted to know, are the children today, with what they're, how they're expressing themselves, would you all say that they're dealing with old wounds that have festered and can no longer be contained, meaning that perhaps our parents or grandparents, and I know you touched on it a little bit about the generational piece, Asha, you know, how it still impacts us throughout the generations. But I wanted you all to kind of speak on that, on if you think that that's it, and then also how can we help so that we can begin to deal with it in this generation, so that we won't continue to keep it going forth from generation to generation to generation. So go ahead, Dr. Isaiah, and then Asha, if you would please speak on that as well.
Yeah, I have to say yes. We are dealing with, you know, real hurt, real pain that didn't start today. And when we talk about the legacy of the history of race relations in our country in America, and how it set up economic types of dynamics where, the Black community may have had less access to certain resources. We talk about the Homestead Act and looking at the availability of property, which is capital that you can pass on to your kids and put them in a safe neighborhood, putting them in certain schools. These are things that definitely impact our community, and our kids, even though they might not fully be conscious of that impacting them per se, they are impacted by the legacy of that. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is, when kids are growing up, they learn how to see the world through the adults who are around them, how that they're informing them, and the stories that they're telling them. And so, if the parents are hurt, if the parents have experienced trauma, they're passing this on to their kids, whether it's through just the way that they respond to stress, whether it's through what they say just in jest, or what they directly tell them. Look, you're going to have to go out there, you're going to have to do twice as much for half, right? And work twice as hard for half as much. And these beliefs start to, like you said, fester and build. Now, here's the thing. You said, how do we move forward? That's not the whole story, because we do see many in our community who have really been able to be professionally successful, personally successful, despite, coming from neighborhoods of poverty and neighborhoods that, or families that are dysfunctional in some way. And I think one of the key pieces is that they found support systems that build them, whether it's a faith community, whether it's a mentor somewhere in their community, whether it's just getting more knowledge about, all right, this is the situation I'm in. How can I work hard to get to where I need to go? And so, I think it's really that balance in terms of acknowledging what we've gone through, but also acknowledging our resilience and our ability to move forward and really acting on that, and not just acting on it in word, but actually acting on that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Should I chime in?
Sorry.
Yes, please, Asha. Yes.
Okay. So just to tag on to that, that was a great point of view that Dr. Pickens just brought up. But also with regards to, is this something that's being passed down to this current generation? When we look at other civil and social movements over the centuries, we see that really the revolutionary movements are always conducted by young people. It's a young person's spirit that really revolutionizes change. So it's not new to the movement in terms of the age group of the people that really want to see real change from where they exist. However, we're also taking into account that we're looking at kids of color, Black and Latino, in urban communities that come from a legacy of people who are about ultimate movement, change, real change, long-term change. So it's not that we think that now these young people today are doing something that's totally different from what they've seen before, but what may be a little bit different now than maybe the generation before theirs or two before theirs is that there's no model in place for how young people can be revolutionized in this current day and age. So when we look at maybe the civil rights movement, and there were several different ways in which the models existed and coexisted with Malcolm and Martin and some of the women in the Black Panther Party movement, some of the men in the Black Panther Party movement, there are different ways in which people can take up arms and go fight and lead the people. But now we don't have those particular models in these different communities so that they can see how to revolutionize change through the legal system, the political system, the social system. They see it as a way in which what ultimately we're seeing on the news is where it's looking violent and it's looking as though it's constant and continual violence. But what the smaller mediums are showing is that there are great independent movements that are going on with young people that are totally leading legislations, totally influencing policy, and it's going around nationwide, and we have to acknowledge and honor those young people as well that are doing it in a very just and profound way.
And what would add to with that, because I think that's right on target, is that this moment in history is different partially because of the information age. Information moves around so quickly now, so it's both a gift and a curse. So we might feel more impassioned to do something because we see this YouTube clip, but then at the same time we might be getting information from a place that's not completely accurate, and it's just making our beliefs about something that already is inaccurate even more inaccurate. And so, I think our kids today have so much more power potentially, each of them, so there might not be that one monolithic leader, but there are so many little leaders that can potentially rise up just by the amount of followers they have on Twitter. And, I think that creates a amazing opportunity for this generation to potentially do more than any generation that preceded it.
I agree.
That's a great point. Thank you, Dr. Isaiah Pickens. I love how you put that. You said that it may not be the great Martin Luther King or the one leader that we're looking for, but there are many, many smaller leaders that are rising up. And that's something that is essential and key, because a lot of people are always asking, how can we what can we do? How can we do it? And I love how you're saying that you could just be a small leader. Essentially, you're saying that you can do it from that perspective. So that's awesome. And if you guys are just tuning in, we're talking about how to deal stress, community, and change. And we're having a live panelist discussion with BlackDoctor.org and our panelists talking about the effects of violence from a community perspective. So with that being said, we're going to go on to the next question, which is, what are some steps that we can take to help those that are hurting within our community? Or if you want to give 5 tips, Asha, or maybe, or Dr. Isaiah Pickens, just 5 tips on what can we do to help those that are hurting within the community.
So I think that's a great, point to continue on with, is that, one, we have to recognize that people are in continuous emotional pain and psychic pain. It becomes more heightened as people, again, feel threatened. But really, people are in emotional, psychic pain on a continuum. And so people are really learning how to cope and adapt in many, many ways. So we think of more often the negative sides of adaptation, which comes with substance use or hypersexuality, overeating, not taking care of ourselves. But then there's the other ways that people are adapting in terms of being able to live profoundly, tap into their spirit more, take up a new exercise, engaging more with their families. So there's ways that people as human beings by nature learn to adapt to their current and possible future situations. So we want to continue to be able to be present to people by just engaging with folks. If we haven't heard from our loved ones or our neighbors or our friends, we want to reach out and call on them, see how they're doing, what their needs are. We want to invite people out to be a part of communal giving. I think most of the time when we think about the ways in which we want to see change, we do it in times of crises. When we're not in crises, we have to continue to remind people to engage in community affairs, join in, be a part of the community. So community check-ins are very important. We want to continue to reach back out to our young people and say, look, I see you. You're not invisible. You do matter to me. And be present both mentally and physically in some other young person's life, whether it's your own child or your neighbor's child or your loved one's child down the street. You have to be aware that there are people who are in need and they need your help and support. And being part of a community village mentality really has ultimately helped our people along the way. So those are just, for me, the first 3 things that come to mind when I think about how I touch my clients and I touch the community and I go and walk and talk with people, is that people ultimately want to be recognized, they want to be acknowledged where they are, they want to be heard, and they want to feel supported, respected, protected, and loved.
I'm actually going to steal everything Asha just said but bring it down to the individual, because I think that's exactly what needs to happen. One of the things I think we really need to start practicing are healthy routines. These healthy routines for the individual can be just how they start their day. Are you starting your day early enough to get breakfast? Are you taking time so that you're not rushing everywhere that you go and you're feeling stressed out? I personally hate rushing. I try to plan things so far ahead so I can just, kind of sway to wherever I'm trying to go, so I don't have to feel like, the pressure of whatever's happening to me. And I think in our fast-paced society, we're constantly teaching go, 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 but we're not setting the right kind of boundaries. I mean, I think that there should be times, an hour or two a day, where you just say, all right, let's put our cell phones down. Let's have dinner together. Let's do things that connect us as people. Because with these pseudo connections, it tricks us. They're illusions. They make us feel like we are really connecting, but we're not connecting in that deep, authentic way that really helps us grow as people, that really moves us as people. And so, healthy routines as a whole, I would say that is my major recommendation, because you can incorporate that into every part of your life. And here's the last thing I would say: give yourself a break. I think so many people, especially, I know all you Black Doctor folks are overachievers out there. And so you're working, but you're not giving yourself time off. For me personally, I take Sundays off. I do no work on Sundays. In fact, I hope to get a massage this Sunday. So, you got to relax. You got to really just take time for yourself. And that is the most important part of your healthy routine.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much. And the conversation was getting so good. My cat wanted to come and participate as well. But thank you so much for that. I appreciate you saying that, because we push ourselves so much. We don't know when to just take a break. One of the things that I've learned to incorporate is no phones at the table, no phones. It's so easy to have your phone everywhere and want to kind of plug in and tune in, and that does give you a sense of like always being connected. I've taken a lot of the social platforms off my phone because it was like all those alerts were causing me to just be so unattentive to the present, and just being in the moment, and just being able to be alive and live without being tethered to all of these different social networks. So I appreciate you speaking on that and saying that. One of the questions that I have: what can we do for someone, in addition to some of the things you all mentioned, what can we do for someone who's been impacted by this sort of violence? Like, what are some ways that we can speak to them and like help them to heal? And I'll start with you, Asha. Okay.
Oh, okay. I was going to jump in. One of the things I'm doing with the clients that I see now is that I really just basically ask people how are they, and I'm genuinely interested in finding out how they are. We move, like Dr. Pickens was saying, we move so fast that we say, how are you? And it's really a colloquial hello, and we're passing through and not really caring much about how people are doing. People are going to tell their story, and they're going to tell it the way they feel best. They're going to tell it authentically. They're going to tell it from their soul. They're going to tell it in the moment in which they sit with those feelings and those thoughts that they probably haven't been sharing completely with anyone else until someone is kind enough to ask and really be interested in finding out the answer. So really just start there. It's that basic for me. It's that simple. I'm inspired oftentimes with my clients when I just allow them to sit in their moment and be able to share whatever bubbles up to the surface, because ultimately people aren't even aware sometimes of all that they're holding, because they're in movement and constant action and constant angst and constant, thinking and worrying. And we just really want people to understand that it's okay to be where you are. It's really okay to have the feelings that you have. It's okay if those feelings shift, especially when we're in a crisis or we're in a heightened environment, when we feel stressed, when we feel worked up, and we don't know what to do with all of that. It's okay to be in those moments, and if those moments change, that's completely all right as well.
That's good, and I appreciate you saying that, and I want to know your thoughts on that as well, Dr. Pickens. But real quick, I was watching one of the videos yesterday that had been posted up, and there was a guy doing a Michael Jackson routine, and I don't know if you all saw that video, and he was like just out there getting it, and I mean, he was just doing this routine while you see the police officers and their barricades and just all of this turmoil, but he was just expressing himself. And I just had this awesome thought about the many faces and the many ways that people cope with things. Sometimes we may say, oh, well, why don't you journal? Why don't you meditate? Or like we'll get on different people for how they express themselves. But sometimes there is no rule book within our community. Someone said, jokingly, that PTSD is post-traumatic slave disorder, and I was like, oh, what, where did that come from? And when they said it, and I was like, wow. And it's like sometimes you never really have a place, and that's why I just so value people like yourselves in the mental health community, because we haven't been given a rule book on how to express ourselves. we haven't been given a space to really kind of speak and really be vulnerable in that regard, to say, man, I'm hurting, or I don't know if I'm showing it in the best way, but I need to express this. I need to get it out. So I appreciate you saying that, and even the authenticity of just saying, how are you, and meaning it. So I appreciate that, Asha. Thank you. You can go ahead, Dr. Pickens.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm mad you saw my Michael Jackson video. No, I'm just kidding. You got to release it somewhere. No, but seriously, I think that this idea of being mindful is so important that Asha's talking about. My word would be empathy. So many people have heard that word, but they lose the meaning of it. And empathy is really being able to share someone else's feelings and really understand things from their perspective. And here's the thing: if you're really trying to understand something from someone else's perspective, if they're not really sure about where they're going, you wouldn't feel like to share you have the answer already either. So here's what I mean by that, and this goes back to what I was saying about always trying to fix it. Someone is like, I don't know, I'm just mad right now, but I'm also not sure about what I want to do next, and all these different feelings are coming up. Empathy wouldn't be like, I see what you're saying, but here's what I would do. As soon as you say, but here's what I would do, you're almost not allowing them to have their space to really feel what it is they feel. But if you say something like, you know what, I understand that. One time I had this situation where I just didn't know what was next, and I really felt that. Like, it sat with me, and it made me not sure who to connect with, what to do. Like, that's real. And then you sit with them with that. That can make someone feel so connected with you in a way that just trying to fix their problem doesn't, even though that is our natural inclination. We want to help the people we love. We want to fix what's going on in their life, but that might not be the best route to help them on the path that they're on. And so, I think that my biggest part of, helping to heal and helping to move is for all of us to learn how to show true empathy.
Thank you for that. That is awesome. I really appreciate that. I saw a little clip on, I can't remember if it was a TED Talk or what it was, but it was something to the effect of, people who are empathetic, they're willing to kind of get in that hole with you and get dirty. Sometimes we have this standoffness, like, oh no, this is getting too deep, this is getting to be too much, and we want to kind of have an outdoor kind of stay away from me perspective, because we don't want to get into that emotional turmoil or what we think it is. But sometimes that is just the thing that's needed, to go in those feelings or go in those dark spaces, so then you can see the light, because there is a great duality within our lives that work to bring us to the places sometimes that we need to be. And sometimes it may take speaking with the professional. Sometimes it may take going to a group or having an outlet or a release, so that you can do that in an environment that is massaging and working for your good, working for your well-being, your mental well-being. If you're just tuning in, this is BlackDoctor.org, and we are having a live panel discussion addressing the effects of violence from a community perspective, holding space for you to discuss ways to deal, holding space for you to vent, get your feelings out, ask questions, and just have an open dialogue. So we are in the final stages of this discussion, and I just wanted to kind of hear any final thoughts that you guys have, any just final words of encouragement, any, just whatever you want to say. I offer you guys the floor just to speak, and I'll start with you, Asha.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity for us to have this dialogue, and doing it in such the immediate sense of what's happening nationwide, but also what's happening specifically in Baltimore. I'd like to just challenge our young people to be continually brave and break the mold of whatever you feel has been holding you back, whatever self-concept someone has given you to identify with as a man or a woman or a person of color. Break that mold and live in your true being, and continue to explore what that is. Continue to tap into your soul and your spirit, because ultimately we're spiritual beings living in a human world. And so there is no mold of how we should be. We have to continue to be whatever it is you're safe in feeling in those moments. So if you're a man and you need to cry, that is exactly what you should be doing. If you're a woman and you have something that you need to say, speak up and speak loudly about it. If you're a person of color and someone told you that's not how people of color behave, break that pattern of believing that to be true and stand in your own authentic, real self, and it will be okay, and you will be impacted like you've never been impacted before.
Thank you, Asha. That was powerful.
Yeah, I definitely echo that call to, really think about who you are and understand our community. And when I say community, of course, we're communities within communities. We're the Black community who's in certain neighborhoods around the community, around America, within America, global citizens. And so, really think about all those aspects of yourself and understand that we are multifaceted people. There's not just one way to deal with situations, not one way to deal with problems. And I really encourage you to think about what you can contribute, how you can help solve the problem, because the problem is moving closer to a solution if you're giving. If you're serving someone else, we're moving closer to a solution. And so think about how you're serving others, because one of the best ways for us to deal with our own wounds is to help someone else heal theirs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Isaiah Pickens, and thank you so much, Asha. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and being here and being available to our community, because it is so needed. And if I had a final thought or just something that I would share, I would definitely share the sentiments of what you guys said, and just even add just to be willing to go into some of those dark spaces and just really see what it is and what you're feeling, and be in tune with that, and be in tune with just whatever comes up, and be willing to talk about it, share it, seek out mental health professionals. Definitely tune in and look at BlackDoctor.org as a resource. We have some really great articles and tips and ways on how to cope and how to deal with even PTSD within our community. So please utilize us as a resource. Asha and Dr. Isaiah Pickens both contribute to our site, so please feel free to just peruse, find what you need, get the help that you need, and we'll be here for you. So I thank you guys for participating. I thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you for just being here. We couldn't be here without you. So thank you so much, Dr. Isaiah Pickens, and thank you, Asha. I really appreciate you, and I thank the people for tuning in to BlackDoctor.org's live panel discussion.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay. Yes, and everyone have a great night, and we will be rebroadcasting this again. Thank you.